Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Aquarium Online Academy. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today is Friday, July 17th, and you are joining us live. I am here at the studio at the Aquarium of the Pacific. My name is Allie, and I am really excited for our deep sea exploration class today. I am joined by some friends here in the studio. I have Stacy behind the computer. She's going to be helping show us some beautiful images, some pictures. I also have Talia manning our text line because we want this program to be as interactive as possible. And the way that we do that is by having you send in your questions. So if you have a question or an observation or something you'd like to share with us today, please text in your question to 562-286-1838. And if you are some of our younger viewers, please check with your adult because regular texting rates do apply. We want to make sure everybody knows that. If you are not watching this program live, we'd still love to hear from you. You can either text us using that number, or you can always send us an email live@lbaop.org. We are so happy to be joining you during these unique times, and we're excited to continue to connect you with the aquarium and all of the amazing habitats that we like to represent. So I hope you're excited to learn more about the deep sea, engage, send us some questions, and turn on those scientist observation eyes. So as I said, today we are going to be exploring the deep sea. Now, one of my favorite things about the deep sea is that I bet you're going to ask me a question and my honest answer is going to say, I don't know. And there might not be anybody on the planet who knows the answer to that question. How amazing is that? But we still get to ask these questions. We still get to come up with some guesses or hypotheses to figure out what we can learn. Are you guys ready? So let's get started. Here we have not a deep sea habitat. Of course, this isn't a deep sea habitat, but this is a habitat that you might be very familiar with. This is our tropical gallery. It is one of the live webcams that we have available to you whenever you'd like to tune in. We have about 8 of them around the aquarium, and they are a great opportunity for you to connect to our animals and to see how they're doing. We love when you tune in and watch our webcams. But this webcam gives us a great starting point today to talk about ocean exploration. So if you were in Palau, where this exhibit is modeled out of, and you were asked, hey, what's in the water? How would you discover what was in the water? Well, you could ask somebody who had been there. What else could you do? You could put on a mask and snorkel and you could jump in the water, right? That is a way of exploring this habitat. But if we think about all of the diversity of animals, we think about all of these different species. We have some eagle rays, we have corals, we have unicorn fish, we have sharks, we have this incredible diversity. This is just the very top layer of the ocean. The average depth of the ocean is actually 2 miles. But I like to think of this top part of the ocean where light is penetrating as really just this very thin layer on top. Now you can see the light coming into the surface. Why is that important? Why would it be important to consider that light could penetrate into this water? Well, we know that there are animals that rely on that light in order to grow. What are those? Plants, of course. So plants require light in order to do photosynthesis. Now you might wonder if this is a plant right here. This is actually a coral. This is an animal. But even though these animals aren't doing photosynthesis, they rely on those primary producers or those animals, those smaller animals in the food chain, to take energy from the sun and convert it into food. These food chains that rely on photosynthesis only represent this very, very thin top layer of the ocean. Oh, we have a question. Alan's favorite deep sea animals are goblinfish and dragonfish. If that's the Alan, I think it is. Hi, Alan. It's so good to see you. Goblinfish. We might take a look at some of those fish a little bit later as we go deeper into the ocean. So we can explore this part of the ocean fairly easily, right? We can scuba dive. We can snorkel. We can learn a lot about this environment. But as we get deeper, what begins to happen? Have you ever dove down into the water in a pool or maybe even in the ocean, what happens to your body? Have you ever felt anything in your ears or maybe even right here, right below your eyes? Yeah, you might have felt some pressure. Well, as you go down into the ocean, and you don't have to go very deep, because of the density of the water, you begin to feel pressure in your body. Any space that you have air. So pressure is going to be a major challenge for us as we go deeper into the water. What's another challenge for us as we explore the depths of the ocean? Well, we said right here there's light penetrating, but does that light ever stop? Absolutely. Isn't it amazing? Water is 800 times more dense than air. This sunlight travels all the way from the sun to the surface of our planet, and it can't reach the bottom of the ocean, right? That sunlight is not able to penetrate. So we have pressure as a challenge. We have light as a challenge. Anything else? Temperature, maybe. It absolutely gets colder as we go deeper into the ocean. So today what we're going to do is, whoa, hey shark. Today what we're going to do is we are going to explore into the depths of the ocean and learn a little bit more about how we explore and why we explore these habitats. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do about one of the largest habitats on our planet. Isn't that amazing? So how do we do that? Well, one way that we are able to explore is we use research vessels that go out into the ocean and put mechanisms into the water for us to explore. So this is a really great image that we see here of an ROV, or a remotely operated vehicle. Now you might see, as we are showing images today, you will likely see this NOAA Office of Ocean Exploration and Research. We call those guys NOAA OER, and we've partnered with them to provide teacher workshops for many, many years. What's amazing about NOAA is this is a federal agency. They are funded by your tax dollars, and they are, NOAA is the same overarching branch of the federal government that also encompasses the Weather Service. So incredibly important. NOAA stands for National Office of Atmospheric, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So sorry about that. NOAA is a major government entity under the Department of Commerce, and they are one of the ways we know more about our planet. So this is a picture of the NOAA's ship of exploration called the Okeanos. So if you imagine, this ship goes out into the ocean and it's able to collect a lot of information. And if you see this little soccer ball, or kind of huge looking soccer ball right there, this allows the Okeanos to share images and information almost in real time as they are exploring. So we are so grateful for our partners in NOAA's Office of Exploration and Research, because they're able to share these incredible pictures with us, incredible videos with us, and help us really ask more questions about this large habitat on our own planet. So this research vessel will go out and it will have scheduled exploration scheduled trips. And one of the ways that they're able to explore once they get to the site is they are going to put those ROVs down into the water. Now, an ROV is a remotely operated vehicle. This one is not, you'll see this one right here, you'll see this little sticker right here. So NOAA is not the only entity that is doing ocean exploration. The Schmidt Ocean Institute. So sorry, Schmidt Ocean Institute. Also, they're the Falcor, right? Yeah. The Schmidt Ocean Institute has the Falcor, which is another ship of exploration. So this is a really amazing tool called an ROV. Now, remotely operated vehicle means that there does not need to be a person in the ship when it is in the ocean. Well, what does that mean? That means that people can remotely operate it, can man it from the ship, almost like a little remote control car. That also means that it can be in the water for extended periods of time. You'll see that there are some different extensions on that. Depending on what the mission of the exploration is, the ROV might be collecting water samples, it might be collecting rock samples, it might be taking video. So we have all of these amazing tools. Now, I don't know about you, but I sort of think about this as like, you know, when you go camping and you want to make sure that you don't forget anything and you want to make sure that your gear all works. Well, imagine what it would be like to be out in the middle of the ocean and need to put this way down into a very extreme environment that's very cold and very deep with lots of pressure. You want to make sure your equipment works, and you want to make sure that you have with you anything you need to be successful. Another way that we might collect water samples are with this water sampler device. Now, as you imagine, we're going down deeper and deeper into the ocean. A question you might have is, does the water change as you go down? Well, once you hit a certain depth, you have a lot of consistency in the ocean. In fact, there is a lot of water that is really the same temperature, the same salinity. But we can know more about how that water changes by using something like this. And I believe this was also from the Falkor, so that's Schmidt Ocean Institute research vessel. Each of these is its own little water sampling tube. And as the tool goes deeper into the water, it's able to collect water at different depths. Why would that be important? Yeah, so that you could compare, so that you could look at the water chemistry, you could look at the temperature, you could look at the salinity to know more about how it changes. Now, we've really only talked so far about physical oceanography, right? How cold is it? What's the pressure like? What's the salinity? How does it change? That is just learning more about the environment. But I bet you also want to know, what kind of animals do we find down there? When we think about the deep sea environment, again, we're thinking about those cold, dark, lots of pressure environments. And so we can sort of see some different adaptations in different animals. Now, one of the first ones I always think of is bioluminescence. So Stacy's going to give us an example of bioluminescence in an image. When we have a huge science word like bioluminescence, we can try to break that down a little bit. So bio is like biology, the study of living things. Luminescence is light. So bioluminescence is the ability of an organism to produce its own light for a number of different reasons. So this is, Stacy, remind me the name of this. Pandalid shrimp. So we think of many of our organisms with bioluminescence, maybe having them in patterns on their body, but this amazing shrimp actually puts out a bioluminescent cloud out into its environment. Now, again, when we think about this deep sea environment, we do not have photosynthesis. We do not have plants that are serving as the base of the food chain. So where are these animals getting their food? Well, for a lot of these animals, they need to eat when they find an animal, or they are likely going to get eaten. But they can also get their food from above. There's this concept of marine snow, which basically means that nutrients are falling from the surface and are providing an important resource for some of these animals. So why is this shrimp using bioluminescence? Well, I would probably guess that this is a defense mechanism, probably to keep it safe. But there are other organisms that might use bioluminescence to attract a prey or attract a mate. It is more likely in the deep sea that animals are using some form of bioluminescence. It's very common. What's interesting too about this bioluminescence is that it is a cold heat, or cold light. Sorry, I always mess that up. Cold light. So what does that mean? Well, if you think about putting your hand out in the sun or putting it right under a light bulb, you can see light coming off of that, but you also feel heat from that light source. This is producing light, but it has no heat associated with it, meaning it is an incredibly efficient light. It is just the result of a chemical reaction. Bioluminescence is so neat. Oh, perfect. Thank you so much, Stacy. So here we see some other organisms that you might be familiar with when we think about the deep sea. So we see this guy has like bioluminescent pores all along here underneath. We see, let's see, this guy probably has bioluminescence maybe on its body or even on the little lure. This flashlight fish has a bacteria that lives right under its eye that provides a little bit of bioluminescence. Let's look at other adaptations when we look at these fish. Besides that bioluminescence, what else do you notice? Some commonalities. Well, I notice some big teeth and really big mouths. Like even for his body, like this guy, he has a big mouth relative to his body. Why would that be beneficial in the deep sea? Well, again, if there's any interaction between organisms, somebody has to be getting a meal. So for this guy, you might think, oh my gosh, what is so big that he eats with those huge teeth? Actually, those teeth just sort of act like a jail. They can grab food, and even if the animal is still alive, it's sort of stuck inside those teeth. In the deep sea, we see a lot of jaws that can be unhinged in order to open up, right? There's one other observation that I can see when I look at these animals, and that is there's interesting eyes. This is a really big eye. This is a really big eye. This doesn't seem to have much of an eye. When we think about light as we get into that mid-water area, we sometimes call that the twilight zone. Maybe there's just a tiny little bit of light, but no photosynthesis. Well, for that habitat, an animal with a really large eye might mean that they're trying to get as much light into their eye as possible in order to see. But then maybe as we go deeper, there's not really need for any eye. So maybe we start to see no eye or very, very small eyes. All right. When I look at this, the other observation I make is, oh my gosh, those are so unique and so extreme. How amazing that we have these organisms that are still being discovered and still being found. Now, that is my favorite part of ocean exploration. When we think about going down into the ocean, we don't necessarily know what we are going to find. So why do we go? Well, we can learn more about our planet. We can learn more about our ocean. We can learn more about the interconnectedness between all of these habitats. The idea that the surface of the ocean that we can explore is connected to the deep sea. How interesting, how amazing is that? Thinking about what we can learn by looking at the bathymetry or the bottom of the ocean. Knowing that we're finding volcanoes and canyons that tell us about the history of our planet. So speaking of those volcanoes and canyons, one discovery that was made while exploring the ocean was a very unique habitat called a hydrothermal vent. Have you ever heard of a hydrothermal vent? All right, so we're going to share some pictures to help us learn about hydrothermal vents. Now, when we started our class, we talked about how so many food webs and food chains started with photosynthesis. The idea that at the base of every food chain or food web is a primary producer that is performing photosynthesis. Well, we discovered these habitats. This is a black smoker. This image also is courtesy of NOAA. What we found is there are these areas where the crust of the ocean is very, very thin. And we have this heat coming from underneath that is producing these black smokers. Now, these plumes are very rich with sulfur, okay? That sulfur is essential to these animals right here. And you might say, wait a minute, those are animals with the little red dot and the little white stalk? It was discovered that there are tube worms who have a symbiotic bacteria that live inside of their gut that allow them to convert the sulfur from these plumes into food. What? Isn't that amazing? This is called chemiosynthesis, sort of like photosynthesis, but instead of using light, these tube worms are able to not eat, but just rely on the bacteria inside their gut. I bet they smell awful. They must smell awful. That's all I can always think. These tube worms also can grow to be 6 feet in length. Now you might say, well, that's great that those tube worms live there, but is that the only animal that lives in a hydrothermal vent? No, there are more. Let's see if we can see any in this particular picture. Sometimes we'll see little crabs that crawl around the, oh, awesome. Sometimes we see little crabs that crawl around the tube worms. One of my favorite is a Yeti crab that sort of just puts his fuzzy arms over the vent to just catch some of the sulfur. It's amazing that there's so much diversity. Now, here's another amazing thing. You might think, oh, okay, well, once scientists know where these hydrothermal vents are, they can go visit them forever because they'll always be there. Well, let's think about what the base of this environment is. It's that black smoker, which is caused by, oh, awesome. It's caused by that heat that is just under the crust of the ocean. Well, we know that the surface of our crust is constantly moving. Those plates are very fluid. So if that hot spot moves, the entire habitat could be changed. And in fact, scientists found that. They discovered a hydrothermal vent environment. They went back a few years later and it wasn't there. It had moved. This is a great illustration of sort of some of the dynamics of a hydrothermal vent, again, where we have that hot magma just under the crust. And some of these plumes can be, did we say 700 degrees Fahrenheit? 700 degrees Fahrenheit coming up. So we see the black smoker is 350 degrees Celsius. Now, what I think is also so interesting is right next to it, we're talking about really, really cold water. This is below freezing water right next to it. So we have just this really unique environment. And we've learned more about this through our exploration. How neat. So you never really know what you're going to find. Scientists make their best guesses as they put together these expeditions, but they also know that they're going to discover new things. So one of my favorite examples of sort of unexpected discoveries is research around what happens when whales die. Okay, so if we think about whales being really, really large animals, as they die, well, they're going to eventually sink. And they might go fairly deep into the ocean. So what happens? Well, this is called a whale fall. And as you can imagine, a whale fall is a great source of food for a lot of organisms. So this is a video. I believe this is from Sanctuaries? Channel Islands. Okay, so this one, this is, okay, perfect. National Marine Sanctuary while exploring the Channel Islands. So not too far from where we are. So you can see that this is the remains of a whale. Looks like a baleen whale. It's based on the size and based on the skull. And there's not a ton left. Oh, this was from the Nautilus, okay, which was is from the Ocean Exploration Trust. And those guys are really close. As the whale falls are discovered, they are seeing that all of these different organisms rely on the food that's left behind. And one of my favorite things that was discovered, you know, you'd imagine that there'd be some scavengers, some hagfish, some crabs, some other things that come along and kind of eat the flesh. But as the flesh is completely devoured, what's left? What did you see in that image? Well, it looked like it was really just bones. Well, listen to this. There are worms that eat the bones. This is another whale fall. This one was off of Monterey Bay, which is a really unique habitat because it's sort of this big canyon. They found that in this spot, you can see that there's some octopus, there's some eel pouts, there are crabs in there that are pretty small. They found these bone-eating worms living off of the bones of the whale. And again, these guys are surviving because of a symbiotic bacteria inside it. And when I say symbiotic, that means that they're two organisms that are living together and helping each other. What's really interesting about those bone-eating worms Can you hear me now? Okay, not sure what happened. Okay, Ollie asked, how hot is the steam from the underwater volcanoes? And the seawater can get to be 700 degrees Fahrenheit, which is amazing. Alan wanted to know, why doesn't the cold water, oh, Alan, great question. Why doesn't the cold water turn to ice? Okay, so we said that this cold water in that area is below freezing, and you had a really great question. How does it not form ice? Well, remember that this is salt water, right? So once that salt is in the water, it actually changes the freezing point. So if it were fresh water, it would be frozen. But because it is that ocean water, it will freeze at a different temperature. That's a great question. I understand that we had a sound issue, and I am so sorry. So I want to go back and just make sure, Jax, that you heard our definition of photosynthesis. That is taking energy from the sun and converting it like a plant would do or kelp would do. And symbiotic is where two animals live together and both benefit. And we'll often think about an anemone and a clownfish together is a symbiotic relationship. But this little bacteria that lives inside of the gut of this little tiny worm, that's another symbiotic relationship because the bacteria has a place to live and the worm is able to continue to grow. I love talking about these bone-eating worms because, well, they're called zombie worms too, which is pretty neat. But it's also just a great reminder that there is so much for us to still explore. Most of the largest environment on the planet, most of the deep sea is not explored. We have so much that we still have to learn about the ocean. And every time we go down there, we end up with more questions. These whale falls, for example, scientists discover them and continue to go back over time in order to see the changes. But scientists can also make their own whale fall. They can sink a whale or sink a sea lion and see what animals come along and then study the bone-eating worms that come along. Yes, yes, absolutely. So just a little point. So when they do sink a sea lion or a whale, those animals are already deceased. In fact, we had a scientist come and speak to us, and she was very excited when she got a call from somebody at a local beach that said, unfortunately, a sea lion had washed up and was no longer alive, and she had to act quickly in order to sink that animal. But it was an awesome opportunity for her to learn more about these bone-eating worms. So what is our message today? Well, our deep sea is a huge habitat. There's so much for us still to explore and so much that is still unknown. When we think about different jobs that go into ocean exploration and we think about that research vessel, it's not just the scientists and the PhD on board. Think about the people who have to operate the ROV or even the cooks that have to cook for people as they're on expedition. There are so many different ways to be involved in science that will work for anybody who is interested. If you think, well, I don't really want to be a scientist, but I think this is fascinating, that's another great way to be involved. You can always ask more questions, do some more research, and just like scientists doing deep sea exploration, you never know what you'll discover. I want to say thank you so much for joining us today at the Aquarium Online Academy. Keep making observations, keep asking questions. Feel free to send us any questions or pictures that you have, any observations. You can do that through our text line or email us at live@lbaop.org. We're going to close up our class now, but we'll be back at 1 o'clock this afternoon and then again at 2. And we're so glad that you're joining us. Everyone have a great day. Bye.